بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه أجمعين. So inshallah in today's class we will go over the beginning of the chapter of Mansub nouns, the chapter of Mansub nouns. As you may remember that, or you should remember that the last chapter we studied was the chapter of Mansub or Marfu' nouns. We said how many inflections do we have? We have for nouns. We have three different types of inflection, right? We have for nouns, so meaning nouns except Rafa, Nasab, and what's the last inflection that nouns accept? Does anyone remember?
Is it khafad?
Yes, khafad, very good. The last inflection is khafad. So khafad. So what the author is doing is he's going through each one by one, and he's telling us about the nouns that are marfu', the nouns that are mansub, and the nouns that are makhfud. We went over the marfu' nouns, and we said there were seven. We went over seven marfu' nouns, and I asked that you go ahead and review all of those seven. Today we will begin the mansub nouns, the chapter of the mansub nouns, and the author says rahimahullah, المنصوبات 15 وهي المفعول به والمصدر وظرف الزمان وظرف المكان والحال والتمييز والمستثنى واسم لا والمنادى والمفعول من أجله والمفعول معه وخبر كان وأخواتها واسم إن وأخواتها والتابع للمنصوب وهو 4 أشياء: النعت والعطف والتوكيد والبدل. So what did the author just say? If you go back to the slides, I have translated what he said. المنصوبات 15. The mansub nouns are 15, and they are: the first one, al-maf'ulu bihi, the object. The object. Can someone give me an example of an object in a sentence? An example of an object. For example, I say, Peter drank water, or Peter saw a horse. Water and a horse, both of these are objects in these sentences. Why? So the subject of the sentence, as we already mentioned, is the doer, right? In a verbal sentence, meaning a sentence that has a verb. The subject is the doer. For example, John saw a horse, or Zaid saw a horse. Zaid here and John, they are subjects because they're the doers. They're seeing. Horse, the object is the part of speech, or part of the sentence that an action is being acted upon. Meaning, when you are, for example, you say Zaid hit Amr. Amr is being beaten here, right? And so the action is being performed on Amr. So he is the object. So the object in all sentences in Arabic is mansub, except the object that replaces whose subject is not mentioned. We went over that in the marfu' nouns, in the chapter of the marfu' nouns. But here we're just talking about pure object, an object whose subject is mentioned. An object whose subject is mentioned will always be mansub. An example of that is, I just gave you an example, but I'll give you a less violent example. أكرم زيد عمرا. Right, Amran. Zaid was generous to Amr. Zayd was generous to Amr. Zayd showed generosity to Amr. So Zayd was generous to Amr. So here, what's the inflection of Amran? What's the inflection of Amran? Does everyone sleep? Zayd hit Amr. Zayd was generous to Amr. Amr is an action is being acted or performed on Amr, and he is being shown generosity. So Amr is the object. Amr is the object. Amr is the object. Okay, so that's why it's mansub, as you can see. The second one is wal-masdar. Masdar is the root word of a specific type of root word, which is also called in Arabic al-maf'ul al-mutlaq. Maf'ul al-mutlaq, and this is the root word that sometimes that it is often used in Arabic, and it serves many purposes. For one of the, I'll just give you a simple example, and this is an example that is present in the books. So the fact that it has to do with beating is not it's not on me. So ضربت عمرا تأديبا, or this is I'm sorry, this so this is called مفعول لأجله, and an example for المصدر المفعول مطلق would be ضربته ضربا. I beat him a beating. So let me write that in Arabic. ضرب زيد عمرا ضربا. ضرب زيد عمرا ضربا. And what basically what this translates to is Zayd hit Amr, beat Amr, beating. Okay, so I know this may not make sense if we translate it word by word, but imagine if someone said Zayd hit Amr, Zayd gave Amr a beating. Zayd gave Amr a beating. So what does that indicate when you say, instead of saying Zayd beat Amr, when you say Zayd gave Amr a beating? Does anyone know what that indicates? Like, what are you trying to put emphasis on?
It's on the beating.
Yeah, exactly. You want to say that like the beating was like really like a bad beating when you say Zayd gave him a beating. So basically the same, there are different reasons why you would use a root, the root of a word like this in Arabic. One of them is to put emphasis, right? Is to put emphasis, or sometimes it is used to show the type of beating. Sometimes it is used to indicate the number of times that Amr was beaten. Sometimes, as I said, it's used for emphasis. So here in this case, this is when you say ضرب زيد عمرا ضربا. It basically you could say it's for ta'kid, and you could also say it is for showing the number of times. In this case, you're saying a beating, right? So it's only once. So if I say ضرب زيد عمرا ضربتين ضربتين, or if I make it plural or dual, that means Zayd had Amr twice, gave him a beating twice. But in this case, just remember, like, the main thing that you need to remember is that most of the times this root word is attached to the end of a sentence for emphasis, to put emphasis on the action that was being performed, even if it has other meanings as well, even if it's coupled with other meanings. Does that make sense?
Yes, Sheikh.
So it is darban here. It is darban here, that is mansub, and it is the root. So what do we mean by the root of a word? Maybe I should have explained that. So for example, you say walk or walked. What's the root word of walked? It's walking, right? Or you say saw, the root word of saw is seeing. Or you say ate, the root word is eating. Or you say drank, the root word is drinking. And you say waste. What's the wasting, right? So these are the root words, and that's what we mean here as well. That is what you will attach to the end of a sentence. So in this case, was darban. Darban means beating, which is the root word of what? Of darb, of a beat. Okay, so that's the second one. As we said, there are 15 of them. We probably won't finish all of them, but we'll try to finish most of them. Okay, and the third one is what we call a ظرف الزمان, and this is basically time. The time component of an action. What the time component of an action? I will try to come up with a better translation of this, but for now, just remember what I've written. For example, you say let me try to think of an example in the Quran. There are many of these in the Quran. Or let me just give you. Once I remember the verse, inshallah, I will put. You say رأيته يوم الجمعة. I saw him, or I رأيت زيدا يوم الجمعة. Okay. I saw Zaid on Friday, on the day of Friday. I saw Zaid on the day of Friday. What's the time component of the action here? When did I see Zaid?
Friday.
Friday. So the day of Friday is basically the time component of the sentence. And the time component of the sentence is always, of the action, I'm sorry, is always mansub. Is always mansub. I saw Zaid on the day of Friday. Right? So that's why Yawma here will get nasab. Will get nasab, and this is the part that we are worried about in this chapter. Okay. So, and similarly, ظرف المكان is the space component, or the yeah, so I would just put space component of an action. Where is the seeing being basically taking place? For example, you say رأيته أمام المسجد. رأيته أمام المسجد. You say I saw Zaid. رأيت زيدا أمام المسجد. رأيت زيدا أمام المسجد. What that translates to is I saw Zaid in front of the masjid. What's the space component of this action? So what's the place where this action is taking place? The action of seeing. Yeah, in front of the masjid. So amama, since it's the place where the action takes place, and yawma, it's the time that the action takes place. Let me translate. I think it would be better if I say the time of action, the space, the place of the action, the time of the action. I think that's a better way of translating it. The time of the action and the place of the action. I saw Zaid on the day of Friday. That's time. I saw Zaid in front of the masjid. That is the space or the place of the action. Right. So both of these are always mansub. Both of these are always mansub. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, and the fifth one is al-hal, what we call al-hal. Al-hal is basically, if you translate it, is the situation or the state. The state is a better way of translating it. The state. The state. So what do we mean by the state? For example, you say Zaid came riding. Zaid came riding. What does it mean when I say Zaid came riding? Can someone just decompose this sentence?
I think it's
Yeah, so basically, yeah, go ahead.
Zaid came from somewhere.
So Zaid, of course. So Zaid came from somewhere, but what's the state of Zaid? And what state did he come?
Riding.
Riding, right? So that's the riding part is the state. He's riding a bike or a horse, whatever. But and anyhow, these days, basically the first thing that would come to your mind would be a motorcycle. But the old like this example is given a lot in the books, in the grammar books, and basically in the old days, whenever they said riding, they meant riding a horse, right? Or riding a camel, riding an animal, basically. So basically, rakiban, which is riding, is the state, and the state of the doer of the action, or the one who the action is being performed on, is always nasb, or it's always mansub. It's always mansub. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Let me just highlight this too real quick. Maybe I should highlight them the same color, just so there's no. That's fine. It makes it interesting to look at. The sixth one is tamyiz. Tamyiz is another mansub noun, and basically there are two types of tamyiz, and tamyiz means the clarifier, or the clarifier is a good way of translating it. I'll think of more words to translate, to use for the translation, but it clarifies something. It either clarifies a relation or an essence. For example, you say 29. Is 29 sufficient when you speak, or do you have to add something to the end of 29? Someone may ask you, like, 29 what are you talking about? Like, you can't just say 29, right? Numbers are basically when you refer to them in the real world, numbers don't exist in the real world, right? Numbers are imaginary. If you want to use numbers in the real world, you need to associate the number to something that is real, something that you're counting, right? So whenever you say a number, obviously if not in math class, because in math everything is theoretical, right? But like outside in the real world, when you're talking to people, if you just say 29, like everyone's gonna look at you like you're crazy. But like you have to say 29 pens, I'm selling 29 cars, I'm buying 29, or two horses. So you have to add something to the end of the number, right? To basically to clarify, right? To clarify what you mean by that number. Like, what are you counting when you mention that number, right? So basically the clarifier, so whenever you say 29 horses, the horses part in Arabic is always mansub. All right. For example, if I say 3 pen, and it also, there's maybe I should add something here. So we will go over this. When it comes to Arabic numbers, it is very interesting, because from 3 to 10, from 1 to 2, there's a certain rule you have to follow. From 3 to 10, there's another rule you have to follow. From 11 to 12, you follow a certain rule, and then from 13 to 20, 19, you follow another rule. So this is a bit more advanced, which we can't talk about. But from 13 to 19, whenever you're counting something, or from when you say, or for like when you say 21, 22, 23, the thing that's being clarified will always be mansub, even though from 3 to 10 that's not the case, right? For example, if I said خمسة عشر قلم قلم 15 قلم. So here I'm saying 15 pens. 15 pens, and qalam here is mansub. Why? Because it is the clarifier. What does qalam and what does qalaman clarify here? The number 15, doesn't it? Because the number 15 by itself, doesn't really make any sense in the real world. So when you say qalaman, it clarifies what you meant by 15. Does that make sense, or is that too confusing?
Then it makes sense.
Okay. So qalaman is basically the clarifier will always be mansub. Al-mustathna, the exceptional. So the exceptional in certain situations is also mansub in certain situations, and the different situations we'll study in a different in a more advanced book. But for example, if you say in a sentence, if you say the nation or the group came except their leader, and then the leader is what's the exceptional? What are you what's the exceptional here in this sentence?
It would be leader.
Leader, yes, yeah. So the leader is always mansub. The leader is always mansub. The leader is always mansub. So you say, so in Arabic you would say, I'll change the translation. جاء القوم إلا الأميرة. Okay, I'll change the whole example real quick. إلا رجلا. So the people came except a man from them. Or إلا زيدا. Let me use something that we're all familiar with. So the people came except Zaid, right? So Zaid here is being separated from the people. It's an exception. Zaid is an exception. Zaid is an exception because he did not come. So Zaid in that case will always be mansub. Zaid will always be. The exception is a better word. So Zaid will always be mansub. Okay. The eighth one, and this will be the last one we'll discuss today, is the noun of la, or the name of la. What the noun that comes after la. For example, you say la ilaha illallah. Who can translate la ilaha illallah? There is no God but Allah. There is no deity worthy of worship except Allah. Okay, so there is no deity except worthy of worship except Allah. So when you say La ilaha, what's the inflection of ilaha? What's the inflection of ilaha? Anyone? Ilaha is the noun that comes after what? It's the noun that comes after la. And we said the noun that comes after la, it's always mansub, right? So that's why you say la ilaha. You don't say la ilahi. You don't say la ilahu, right? You say la ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah, right? So that makes ilaha mansub. Okay, so I think as you get the idea, right? So we're going over the nouns that are mansub, and there are different types of nouns that are mansub. Today we went over 8, and next week we'll go over the remaining 7, inshallah. The first one that we went over was the object. The second one was the root, or the unconditional object. That's another way of translating al-maf'ul al-mutlaq, the unconditional object. The unrestricted object. And then the third one we went over was the time of the action. The fourth one was the place of the action. The fifth one was the state of the doer, the subject or the object.
Can't you just say it's the state of the action?
No, because it's rakiban, riding is not the state of the action, but rather is the state of the person who's coming. So it has to be the state of the either the subject or the object. For example, if I say رأيته راكبا, I saw him riding. In that case, it could mean that the object actually, he is the one that's riding. The person that you saw is riding, in a state of riding.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. And then the sixth one was a tamiz, the clarifier. Basically, it clarified something for us. It clarified the number for us. So you say 15 pence. So pens are clarifying 15 for us. What is 15 referring to? What are the units of 15? And then the seventh one was the exception. The exception, like the people came except Zaid. The exception is also mansub in certain scenarios. And the last one we talked about was the noun of la, or the noun that comes after la. And that noun is always a mansub. Okay, so next week we'll go over the remaining 7. Do you guys have any questions regarding the 7 that went over this week? Today?
None.
Okay. Sounds good. So if there are no more questions, inshallah, we'll conclude the class. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم.
السلام ورحمة الله.